Welcome to another episode of The Catholic View for Women, where we give you news and views from a truly Catholic perspective. Hi, I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with my co-hosts Elena Rodriguez and Janet Morana. And oh boy, the title of this episode is Family Feuds, and we're not talking about the fun game show that's been on television for years. We are talking about an issue that most families face in America and around the world. Why we like to think that our families all look like that beautiful Norman Rockwell painting that we see, especially around Thanksgiving time. That's probably not true for many families. The good news is there is a way to live at peace, even if you have issues, with many of us do, and all of us are speaking from experience. Right, ladies?
Indeed.
Absolutely.
There is hope.
Yes, yes.
You know, in my family, per se, well, I'm the oldest of 4 children, and for my parents, they almost had 2 sets of children. There was myself, my brother John, 2.5 years younger. Then there was a big gap because my mom had 2 miscarriages, and my brother James, and he was 11 years younger than I, and then my sister Catherine, 13 years younger. So you could see there was a big, so it's like my parents raised 2 sets of kids, basically. And as the oldest, I always found that I was constantly trying to keep everybody happy, especially when we got into your 20s and 30s and trying to keep this harmony going. And my younger sister was the cause of so much conflict in our family. And at a certain point, she would have nothing to do. Well, first of all, a tragic thing happened. My brother James, who was closest to her, died in 1997 of an illness. And so she was devastated by that. We all were. But she also distanced herself from my brother, who was closest to my age, because he had moved away, and she just shunned him, basically, as far as she was concerned. And I was always trying to be the peacemaker and say, oh, come on, you know. This went on for a long period of time. And the fact that my brother, John, lived so far away probably helped, because he wasn't around for holidays all the time. He wasn't around for things. And she would blame him for that. And it was all this constant. And she would always get my mother. It became like a team thing. She would get my mother teamed with her, then against my brother, and me sometimes, because I was trying to be the Switzerland, waving the Switzerland flag. But that wasn't working. And I'd be like, and it took me a very long time to get, and always pleasing my sister. Like, if she wanted, once she got married, if she wanted the holiday
that is
her
an
house,
impossible thing to do, though, because you can never please anybody,
No,
because everybody
it's
keeps
never enough.
changing the rules. The bar keeps moving all over the place.
and I would constantly, holidays, whatever Catherine wanted, whatever she wanted, whatever this, that. And this went on for the longest time. But the whole thing actually came to a head when my mother got sick. And you know, we brought her home, of course, to my sister's house to be on hospice, not my house, because my house was too small. Like, you know, I was never had anything good enough. My sister had the bigger house, the better house, whatever. So she came home there, and then my sister dictated the schedule. When I could come and help, how I could come and help, who could come and help. It was just a whole fiasco. And it really got to a fever pitch. By the time my mother passed away, my sister got this notion in her head that my brother should be barred from the funeral. I mean, think about this. You know, you're telling a sibling, you can't come to the funeral. And she comes to me and tells me this, don't you let him come. And ironically, my mother died only a few days before my daughter's wedding. So my brother from Florida was coming up anyway for the wedding, and this whole thing drama was going on. And so my sister was in cahoots with the funeral director that said, yeah, okay, we'll keep him out of the wake. And my sister decided not to have a wake, and just be a viewing the morning of the Mass. It was this whole circus that went on. And then she chose, after the funeral, because she wasn't coming to the wedding anyway. She wasn't going to come to my daughter's wedding, because she didn't want to see my brother, because he was coming. So you can picture this conflict. It was like...
I'm laughing because I have a similar scenario, only different. The details are different, but the insanity is the same.
But through this insanity, I mean, thank God, you know, because I work for Priests for Life, I have Father Pavone, Father Dennis, Father Stephen Ambrose, these good priests I'm surrounded with, and I would be going for counsel saying, Father, you gotta help me. What do I do? I mean, I'm praying, but, you know, it drives you insane. But when you think about it, to a funeral director to get involved in a family feud is also crazy, to tell my brother. So my brother, you know, said, look, I won't go the morning, but I'm gonna go to church with you, so we should stand together, you know, at the Mass. And I actually went that morning with a good friend of mine, you know, Anthony DiStefano, and his brother Carmine took me to the wake.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I wanted to say goodbye to my mom. Well, and I went to the funeral director, and I kind of said to him, I said, you know, it's very sad that you allowed, like that you got involved in a family feud like this, you know. And I said, it's shameful, you know. I just left, but we did get through the Mass, and after the Mass, just my sister went to the cemetery because that's what she wanted, you know, no part of any of us there. And then after the funeral, she showed up at, actually it was the day before the funeral, she came to my house and said, after this, I'll have nothing to do with you, and you know, it was a whole thing. And she must have rehearsed it because she stood in my house like it was like a speech that went on for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. By the end of it, I was devastated. And it took me a long time to kind of have peace with it all, because I also then, you know, she turned her 2 children, my niece and nephew, who were...
See, that's what's really sad. That to me, because I,
you know,
we always, and you and I supported each other through we had similar situations.
We support each other with the...
Okay, what happened now? What happened next?
You know, and I have to say, Teresa, through all of it, like I said, I had the priests, you have your spiritual advisors, but I think if you don't have that, you also feel part of it is, you know, we're in such a public eye, and I think everyone thinks, well, your life must be so perfect.
Because you're in ministry, and
you're in ministry,
you know, everything is great
and
for you.
And I want to say to people, no. I have the same struggles and problems. I'm not special. I have the same struggles and problems that everyone else has. And yes, it hurts me so. I mean, my sister, when you think about it, I was in 8th grade when she was born, okay? I diapered her. I took care of her. I was her godmother. I held her in her baptism. All these special occasions through her whole life. I threw her Sweet 16 slumber party at my house. I mean, I could make a litany like a mile long. And this is a person that wants nothing to do with me or my daughters or my 4 grandchildren, and has a strange, like, checked out.
And you still really don't know why. And I don't know why. I have a sister who hasn't spoken to me in almost 9 years since my father died. And I don't know why. The only thing I know is that when my father died, she separated from me and Dominic, her and her husband, wanted nothing to do with us. And yet, thanks be to God, I'm very close to her children. That never affected the relationship with her children. Her oldest daughter is my godchild, and she and I are extremely close. And she calls me all the time, and she's a grown woman now, married with kids, and I'm involved with her children. And I think because I've always really maintained an open door with my sister. I actually said, I don't know what happened. I really don't know to this day exactly what I did. And I said, I don't know what I did, but whatever I did, I'm sorry. I did apologize. And my spiritual director, he told me, he said, you need to keep sending your Christmas cards, Easter cards, and I did, but then they kept coming back. Literally, she would return them unopened, and I would bring them to him, and he said, okay. He said, you're done. You've tried. He said, you just got to keep praying for her. He said, if she ever comes to you and she apologizes or comes and says she wants to come back into your life, he said, what will you do? I said, well, I'll have to sit down and talk, and hopefully we can work it out. I said, I'm open. I've never shut the door. And so that's how I was able to have peace. And also because I had a relationship with the kids. And I think there's something, and I know that your sister's kids were much younger, so it's a little bit different. But the fact that my nieces and nephews, my sister's children, the fact that they're older and they were able to see that they did not agree with their mother with the way she's rejecting us, and they never let that affect the relationship. As a matter of fact, just a funny story. And so this is proof that, you know, even those of us who are administrators, our lives are not perfect. Okay, we all have issues. So my niece, my sister's youngest daughter, Jackie, got married several years ago, and she called us up and she said, Aunt Teresa, this is right before Dominic got ordained, and she said, Aunt Teresa, Uncle Dominic can do weddings, right? And she says, because we're not having a full Mass. And I said, yes. I said, well, if there's a Mass, then he can also serve, and he can do the homily if you like. I said, but if you're not having if you're just having a service, yes, he can do the service for you. And so we ended up doing that. And I said to her, I said, I'm sure Uncle Dominic would love it. You can talk to him. I said, honey, isn't that going to cause problems for your mom? I said, we don't want to get in the way, and we don't want to affect your relationship. You know what she said? She said, Aunt Teresa, my mother's a grown woman. I'm a grown woman. I'm paying for my wedding. You and Uncle Dominic have always been good to us. I want you guys involved. She has nothing to say about it. If she doesn't like it, that's her problem, not mine. Okay? Done. But we were concerned that it would affect our relationship. And so all during the wedding, when Dominic was up there and, you know, the marriage is happening and he's giving the homily or the short sermon because it wasn't a full Mass, we have this saying in Italian, I know there's one in Spanish, but we call it the Malucchia. My sister was dagger eyes at my husband. And all I did the whole time was just pray for her, and I still pray for her. She's my sister, and I don't know what I did wrong. I'm grateful that I have my relationship with her kids, And I just keep praying, and the door is open. But it's very painful because you don't know why.
And so consequently, Teresa and I have adopted each other as sisters.
We're sisters. And we send each other sister cards.
We said it for our birthdays.
But that's the thing, though. God provides, right? I mean, all of us, we're sisters.
Right.
And this is what I tell people.
Because you feel so robbed of that
relationship.
Close family relationship that you didn't have, that is owed to you because there is this other person existing in your family. Yet you feel that. How do you settle that? And it goes on landmark anniversaries, birthdays in your family, difficult moments where you wish you had your sister right next to you, and instead the sister is splitting the family apart.
Well, you know what though? I think
the younger generation affected by this.
What for us, because we do have. Janet and I have literally adopted each other as sisters, and we send each other sister cards now for our birthdays and Christmas and everything. And we truly feel that we are sisters because we have gotten to know each other so well over the years. But I think really when you have that peace in Christ and you honestly have sought advice and you sought help from good spiritual direction and you've said, I really have forgiven her, and I have for whatever I did and whichever she did to me. I don't even know what I did. I have forgiven her, and I'm willing to start over. I absolutely am willing to start over. There's nothing else you can do. You have to let it go. Now, there are times when it's really frustrating. For example, with my elderly mother, my husband and I did not get any help from her children. We did, but not from her, and she's the other daughter. And so there's a lot of pain that's involved there. We're like, why am I doing this alone? My sister should be with me in this area. But at the same time, I know I tried, and I know I'm doing the right thing. And Christ does provide. He gives you not only good spiritual advisors, but he gives us friends and sisterhood and family. Don't doubt that God will replace what you lost.
You know, another thing that creates, I think, a lot of family feuds, so to speak, is Facebook. I have seen more arguing on Facebook with people unfriend family members for a period of time because they're not talking to this, and then suddenly when that boils over, then they refriend again. But this animosity that is built up on social media.
And people taking sides.
Oh,
and
yeah. It's terrible. I mean, it's great having this technology, but when it's used that way, it's really damaging. And I always say, and the other thing that's bad is texting. I watch these young people, and I've even had some of this happen in my family where I have 3 daughters, and and sometimes they text each other, and I say, "Can you pick up the phone?" Because a text message can be misunderstood.
Not to mention the mistakes that can be made in the texting, especially when you're texting quickly.
And I say, "Pick up the phone for crying out loud and speak to the person." So I think what's fueled even more separation in families is the technology and the way we use it.
Right. I think we may not be able to always avoid the family feuds, but we can be the peace within the midst of that, and that's what we're going to be talking about when we come back. So stay tuned. This is Family Feuds Part 1, and we're going to have another episode. Our next episode is talking about how do you also heal some of these bigger relationships in your life if there's been pain, not just with siblings or cousins or extended family. What about if it's the parents? So that will be in our next episode. But when we come back, we're going to have some great scriptural advice and also some advice from our pastoral advisor on sometimes, you just can't fix it. You have to offer it up, and you have to be at peace with yourself. And we'll give you some information on how you can take those steps. Stay tuned. We'll be back. Welcome back to the Catholic View for Women. This episode, we are touching on a topic that I'm sure many of you out there are familiar with, family feuds. The difference is that on this program, we're giving you a Catholic way to look at this, to handle this, to grow from it, and to learn from it as we all continue to do so. It's not an easy thing to talk about, but we never shy away from the easy topics here. And Elena, I know you had a story you wanted to share.
As well, it happens in every family. Sometimes even 2 feuds going on at the same time with different sides of the family.
And you can't keep track of it sometimes.
There's
you need a Philadelphia lawyer, as my mother used to say.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point, because sometimes in the middle of these family feuds, one relative will involve a lawyer against another relative, and that kind of happened with 2 sisters in my family, and there was a lot of mind game going on, and not knowing again what is the reason, what caused all this, to go year in, year out, involving even the husbands of, and even the lawyers. But as you say, there's always hope. And at one point, the two families had to break apart. And then there's that sense of loss as well, where you wish you had these people in the celebrations and growing up with it, and the cousins and the extended family, and it's like they did not exist. So you end up feeling very, very lonely in the world where you actually have your family. But there is hope. There is hope. There was a very very serious heart attack that made one of the sisters really realize, one of these widow makers, definitely. And this happened on the sister's feast day. Oh. And so when this sister woke up, the first thing she did after 3 or 4 days of being in the hospital, a miracle.
Right.
Wow.
Where is my sister? She said. Why is my sister not here? Why is my sister not here? And so, sure enough, there was a reconciliation there. And after that, it's a hard process.
Right.
It takes years. And it's a slow process, but there has been a reconciliation of the families, and it's one of the
God,
greatest
all things are
gifts.
possible. But I think too, what's important is, like in my case, my sister's away from the faith, and she has been for many years, and so there's not that bond there with the faith. Where like Janet and I, all of us have that faith basis where we talk about our faith as a major part of our life. The same thing. Yeah. And so in a way, there's besides blood, and yes, she's my sister, but I don't have a lot to talk to her about. I mean, we're on opposite sides of the spectrum on the abortion issue, on all these different issues on marriage.
And the church.
And the church. And she says nothing. But we invited her to Dominic's ordination. She crossed out the invitation and said, we'll not be attending, and sent a nasty note on the invitation. So that faith isn't there. But again, I keep praying. I keep praying.
Right.
And what we have to understand is that, Janet, you always tried to fix it. I always tried to fix it too. Well, you can't fix it. Sometimes you can't fix it, and you have to be able to accept that.
Yeah, and this is something here that I'd like to read. It's a beautiful article, really, about this topic, excuse me, from Psychology Today. And here's some advice. It says, if you determine after your period of measured contact that you need to stop talking to your family altogether, explain to your family that you need to take a break from talking. But still do not pursue full-blown estrangement. Try writing a letter, calling a family member to say that you want to take a break, excuse me, and tell them clearly the amount of time you are taking, etc., 3 months, 6 months. Explain that you feel taking some time apart could be helpful both for you and them.
But you're giving them an explanation, saying, I need some time right now, I'm going to just take some time to cool off. We never had that. We were just basically told, sayonara, ciao, see you later, and never given really any
culturally,
explanation.
That sometimes isn't so clear as well.
Right. Yeah.
But actually, what can happen is if you go for counseling, which I did, I went to Hope Alive Counseling, which actually I'm now trained in it by Dr. Philip Ney, who did a lot of work with child abuse and neglect and abortion. He's a Canadian psychiatrist who has a family practice. And he recommends it's a process you go through is you start with each person who's hurt you, and you write
write down a letter.
Write down. Well, before you write the letter, you write, you hurt me when, just for your own process. And you begin to list all the things on paper that they hurt, how they hurt you. That's very therapeutic. But then you write a letter to them telling about the hurts, but then seeking reconciliation and say, I probably have hurt you too, and I want to hear now from you.
I tried that. I didn't get any response.
But you opened
what I'm saying is,
I get it. Yeah.
As a therapy thing, you try it anyway, and you send the letter.
Right.
And if they refuse to respond, at least you can have the peace of saying,
exactly.
I laid
tried.
it out.
Yeah.
I shared with you how I feel, how you've hurt me over the years. And then I want to now receive from you. What have I done? Because I want to say I'm sorry. And so sometimes you hit a brick wall like we did, but this process has worked successfully for a lot of people in counseling. And it is a good answer to say. And so this article in Psychology Today talks about sometimes you have to take a break from each other, but sometimes they said it has to be a permanent sayonara, like we said. And unfortunately, in my case, my sister did no communication. She just checked out and told us goodbye, But I think, Elena, I know you have a beautiful scripture to share. Sometimes I think we have to turn ourselves to the Lord more in prayer about these. And I still pray for them. I pray for my sister, my brother-in-law, my niece, my nephew. And I hope one day things could be better. But until that time, they'll always be in my thoughts and prayers.
And that exercise of praying for them is great. It shows great spiritual maturity. Well, Romans 12, 17 to 21 says, "Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be concerned for what is noble in the sight of all. If possible, on your part, live at peace with all. Beloved, do not look for revenge, but leave room for the wrath. For it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay,' says the Lord. Rather, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals upon his head. Do not be conquered by evil, but conquer evil with good."
Yeah, and that sometimes is a tough one, because sometimes you feel like you're being taken advantage of. You don't have to constantly, this is something else I've learned, you don't have to constantly put yourself in harm's way.
Right.
If that person has hurt you continuously and they're not respecting you as a human being and they continue to strike out, it is okay to step back and not to communicate with them for a while, as Janet was saying with the comment
Mother
from that
Angelica
article.
used to say, "Honey, God doesn't want you to be put as a doormat."
Exactly. We don't have to be doormats for this. Being a Christian does not mean a doormat. But it does mean that you don't respond with anger. You just move back and you pray. And if you're not getting anywhere with that person, you just keep praying for them. But I also think, and Father Frank has some good notes on this, our spiritual advisor, these verses from Romans 12 shed light on this common problem. Note how St. Paul qualifies the command to live at peace with all. He doesn't give it as an unqualified, absolute command, because he realizes it takes two to get along. So instead he says, if possible, live at peace. So what does that mean? You can't control what other people are doing. You can only control yourself. I can't control whether my sister is going to respond. You can't control it.
You offer the
Your
olive
relatives
branch.
couldn't, but I offer the olive branch, and it's out there. I felt that when she was sending me those cards back, that she was continually shutting the door, and my spiritual director agreed. He said, "Okay, you don't have to keep getting insulted. You try. Now you just have to keep the door open and keep praying for her." And that's what I've done for the past 8 years.
And of course, another translation there, Teresa, is another translation says, "If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all."
Right.
You know, so again, we do as much as we can, we try as hard as we can, and we pray. And it is good to bring this to spiritual direction. Or if you need to, like I went through some counseling, you go through some counseling, because I know once I did that, then I became more at peace with it. When it was first happening and the turmoil was happening, and she first rejected everybody and walked away from us and said, "I want nothing to do with you anymore," it was devastating, you know. But I think the counseling helped, the ability to journal and write things down and discuss it. But most of all, I would say very important to bring it in spiritual direction or in confession, you know, because we feel guilty about these things.
The whole life of faith brings such a different component into dealing with all this stuff, because I don't know what people without faith do. We only have about 3 minutes left, so I did want to wrap up and remembering that us describing our own situations, that don't feel like your family is the only oddball family out there. Trust me, I've heard from more people in more different places around the world. Everybody's got some sort of an issue. Nobody really has the perfect Norman Rockwell or the Waltons. And even the Waltons had their own issues, for those of us who remember.
Or even like the Holy Family. I think, you know, with the Feast of the Holy Family, that's the hardest, because we look at Jesus, Joseph, and Mary, the perfect, that's what we strive for. And then we look at our own family and go, "Oh my goodness," you know. So
yes, but Jesus was God and Mary was immaculate, so they had a big
they had an advantage.
head start.
They had an advantage. Poor St. Joseph having to deal with that.
Can you imagine? He could never say that they were wrong. Oh, that's right. You're God and you're immaculate. Sorry, I must be at fault.
By definition, that leaves me as the guilty one.
Anyway, on a more serious note, ladies, it's time for homework. So let's, number one, tune in to More to Life, a show on EWTN Radio, weekdays.
Yay, produced by Ave Maria Radio.
10 a.m. And you could call
And
with your
EWTN.
questions at Dr. Greg and Lisa Popchak to solve family problems, or listen later at a good time that is good for you. So you can listen later online.
Also, let's add Dr. Ray Garendi in there.
That's
he's
right.
right after that. He's great, and he's so
Dr.
funny.
Ray is hysterical.
Yeah.
Not only will you get advice, but you'll laugh too.
You'll laugh too.
And
Which is good.
just to go, you go to EWTNradio.net to listen. All right. Advice number 2 of homework is EWTNRC.com for a book for clinical psychologist Greg Pop check. Okay, God help me. These people are driving me nuts.
I love that title.
That's a great title. Okay, so get that book at the EWTN Religious Catalog. Of course, number 3, go to our website, CatholicViewForWomen.com. We'll have all the information that we're telling you. All this homework will be saved up there for you, the links and everything else, so you can find the book, find the radio show, etc. And of course, like us on Facebook, and also be kind and gentle on Facebook too.
Be kind and gentle, and remember, you're not alone. Don't you feel better? This was a free therapy session for all of us and you too. Thanks for tuning in to the Catholic View for Women. You're not alone. We all have these issues, but we're helping them view them through a truly Catholic perspective. We'll see you next time on the Catholic View.